In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to apply dynamic capabilities to MoGraph clones. Okay, so in this lesson, we'll actually start to build up kind of a little carnival type game where we actually have cans that would be stacked up, and we actually throw a ball through those and try to knock those down. So what I can do is just use MoGraph to actually build up this can stacking. Now these cans I actually want to be stacked up in sort of a triangle type shape, so I can just use this basic polygon object and actually use that as my basis for the MoGraph clone. So let's come in, we'll drop in a basic cloner. I'll take my cylinder and put that underneath the cloner. Okay, so now I'll go into my cloner, set the mode to object, take my polygon here, and put that into my object. There we are, so that way we have all of our cans, although they're not stacked up properly. So let's go into our up vector for this cloner, set that to positive y, and there we are. Now our cans are stacked up properly. Okay, so now to add any kind of dynamic capabilities, we do this through a tag. So what we can do is take something like our cloner, let's go up to tags, we'll go to Dynamics tab and add in a Dynamics body. So let's click on this. You can see now we have this Dynamics body tag. And now if I were to come through and play this, we can see that we have things like gravity that are actually pulling these cans down, although they're falling right through the floor, and we really don't want that. So what we need to do is actually make this floor a dynamics object as well. So with this selected, again, go to Tags, Dynamics Tags, and we'll add a Dynamics body onto this. So now if I play this through, you notice that the cans come through and will settle pretty much right on this floor. Now the reason that the floor doesn't fall is because whenever we apply dynamics tag to something that is not MoGraph, you can see that by default the dynamics is set to off if we were to select that tag, which means it will affect and allow dynamics to interact with it, but it won't actually be affected by dynamics themselves. Whereas if I were to select the cloner, you can see that its dynamic is set to on. So now we have the cans falling. What we need to do is take this little sphere here and allow it to be thrown through these cans. So to do that, we're going to select our sphere and again make this a dynamics object as well. So with that, we'll go up to tags and give it a dynamics body tag. And for this one, we'll select it and again make sure that the dynamics is enabled. We can play through and you can see that the sphere just pretty much falls. All right, not really all that exciting. So what we need to do is give this sphere some kind of a forward motion. So with our sphere dynamics tag selected, let's go to Dynamics. We need to come in and set some kind of a custom initial velocity. So let's turn that on. And we want this to move along the z-axis. So let's go ahead and crank this up. Again, we'll need to make sure we hit play. And now it's at least working. So it is moving forward, although it needs to move forward quite a bit more. So we'll continue to kick this up. There we are. It's getting there, so we'll continue to bump this up. So right now you can see that we have sort of a problem, and that is that while this little sphere is actually colliding with these cans, they're really not behaving as you would expect. Now what I might do is go ahead and just take this polygon and maybe just disable its viewport visibility through this stoplight up here, so that way it's not getting in the way. So you can see it's just sort of bouncing off of these cans. Well, right now, by default, what's happening is with these dynamics tags on a MoGraph cloner, it's essentially treating this entire cloner as one single object. And I really don't want that. I want this to behave as though they're a whole bunch of individual cans. So I can go back to my cloner dynamics tag, and what we can do is, underneath our collision with the individual elements, by default it's set to off. So what we can do is set it to something like all, so that way it'll treat every clone as an individual object. And now we're starting to get something much, much better, where it actually is colliding with these cans and letting these fall down. Now, looking at this, it really is not apparent that this ball has any kind of real mass to it. You can see it's really just sort of bouncing off of these cans. So what we can do is actually go into the dynamics for this sphere and actually make it behave as if though it were heavier, so it can really go through these cans. So what we can do is go into this sphere's dynamics tag, go to mass, By default, it's set to use world density, which means its density will actually be based on its actual size. Well, what we can do is maybe just override that. So maybe give it a custom density or a custom mass. And let's maybe dial this up so that way its mass is much higher. And now you can see it goes right through those cans because it's now much heavier, much more dense, and it just passes right through without any problem. Now, we have the ability to start to control stickiness and friction, things like that. So if we were to play through this, you can see that the cans really slide pretty easily across the floor. So if we were to go to the Floors Dynamics tag, scroll down, we have things like bounce, friction, and collision. So maybe if we bump up this friction a little bit more, we should see that these cans tend to stick to the floor a little bit more. You can see that's exactly what they do. We can also tell these cans maybe to not become dynamic until they've actually come in contact with something. You notice as soon as we hit play, it's pretty subtle, but these cans will fall just ever so slightly until they connect with the floor. Again, very subtle, but you can see that just little bitty jump right there. So what we could maybe do instead is go back to the actual cloner dynamics tag, because that's what's responsible for all these cans. Go into the collision, and what we can do is actually maybe in the dynamics, right now the trigger is set to happen immediately, so as soon as we start playback, these guys become dynamic. But what we could say is maybe don't make them dynamic until they actually start to collide with something. So now if I play back, you notice the cans no longer jump from their initial position. They don't actually become active until something hits them. So really start to see some really interesting effects that we can start to get with this. And again, maybe if we wanted these cans to be a little bit lighter, we can just go back to their dynamics tag. Maybe give them another custom mass. See what that looks like. It might be a little bit too high, so we can just try to dial that down. And now you can see, again, those really start to become very heavily affected by any sort of dynamics that we have. So, again, really great capabilities as far as being able to come in and add dynamics, gravity, movement, collisions, and all these different kinds of behaviors automatically to any kind of a cloner object. Now, the thing to keep in mind whenever working with dynamics and things like that is the fact that we can sometimes scrub forward in our timeline, but scrubbing backward really doesn't work because for dynamics to be simulated properly, we have to know the information at the frame before. So as we start to scrub through this, it really is not going to behave properly. So always make it a habit of rewinding your timeline and playing through. Or if you're working with a relatively short sequence, just let it go ahead and continue to cycle through. That way you can make sure that your dynamic behavior in the movement that you're seeing is actually what you would expect to happen. So that's a look at how we can start to add these types of dynamic behaviors to our MoGraph clones.